$80 billion is one estimated cost of last year's wildfires in California. Some have long argued these huge expenses could be lessened if we spent more tax money up front preventing fires in the first place. Lisa Fletcher reports a fix is finally kicking in.
This fire season, we followed the U.S. Forest Service to see their daily race to stop disaster.
What's the best prevention tool?
You know, there's not one tool. It's a variety of tools.
Jason Sieg is a district ranger at the El Dorado National Forest, an hour east of Sacramento. He showed us a site where crews do this. Intentionally set a controlled burn to eliminate brush and vegetation that could fuel a wildfire.
A fire could still move through here eventually, potentially, but if it did, the goal is that it would be at an intensity and a rate of spread to where suppression resources could be in here and work effectively.
A different effort a mile up the road, where what looks like logging is actually fire prevention. Trees are thinned to strip away branches that would fuel fires. Then they're shipped to mills.
You know, there's a lot of acres on the landscape that need to be treated, need to be managed.
El Dorado alone spans nearly 800,000 acres. Protecting all that land is a massive, expensive endeavor. And too often, those efforts are shortchanged when money shifts from prevention projects to emergency firefighting. 4 years ago, we decided to follow the money. Here's then head of the Forest Service, Robert Bonney, in 2016.
Last year, in a bad year, we spent north of 60% on fire-related expenses. So you can see that the agency is being more and more less a Forest Service and more a fire service.
At the time, the U.S. Forest Service was spending so much of your tax dollars on emergency firefighting, it said it was forced to borrow from other important budget areas, robbing from efforts to prevent fires in the first place. There's evidence of that beyond this line of green trees in El Dorado. This is where the King Fire burned in 2014, scorching an area bigger than Atlanta and forcing the evacuation of almost 3,000 people. Fighting that fire cost $117 million, putting budget pressure on the already strained Forest Service. In 1995, 16% of the Forest Service's annual budget went to fires. In 2015, that was up to 52%. And without change, by 2025, it was projected to be near 70% of the budget spent on wildfires. But that change may have arrived in 2020. This year, the fire funding approach is different.
This is going to be the first year that we're going to be able to explore a new tool that Congress has provided with the fire funding fix.
President Trump signed a spending bill in 2018 that includes a fire funding fix starting this year. The fix allows the Forest Service to use federal disaster relief funds, treating fires more like other disasters like floods and earthquakes. It also raises the funding for firefighting by more than $2 billion.
This new model that we're going to
Deputy Regional Forester Tony Scardina calls it a good first step.
And so at least in this situation, we'll have that increased level of funding on the suppression side and not having to borrow from the prevention and mitigation side.
Though there's a lot to figure out.
One of the common threads when talking about the current situation was that it's sort of akin to we've stopped the bleeding, but the patient is still in the ER.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it sounds about right. You know, we are a long ways away from trying to turn the corner. We have to keep making steps forward. The fire funding approach and some of the help from Congress is going to help us take that step, but there's a lot more to it than that.
California's fire season is starting earlier and ending later, posing a threat to communities all over the state. The hope is new federal funding will allow the Forest Service to put the focus back on prevention.
And besides money, there's a political factor.
There is. Last fall, President Trump actually tweeted that California's governor had done a terrible job of forest management and threatened to cut off federal funding. What a lot of people didn't know is that more than 50% of California's forests are owned and managed by the feds.
Really interesting story. Thanks, Lisa.